The views and opinions expressed on Unlock Your Wealth Radio are those of the host, guests, and callers only and are not necessarily the views of Unlock Your Wealth Radio, Heather Wagenhals, or Success Publishing International.
More willpower than a barefoot woman at a shoe sale. Able to stretch a single paycheck for an entire month. Makes money concepts easier than third grade math. Introducing your purveyor of prosperity, Heather Wagenhals.
Work all day, stress all night. Take your mind off your money and focus on your life. Money don't matter or the stuff it bought. It's the way you think, not what you've got, yeah.
Unlock Your Wealth Radio starts now. Get your money mind right. Woo.
Unlock Your Wealth Radio is sponsored in part by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook get a free audiobook download.
Load down.
Yeah, there you go. A load down. Go get a load down at heathersfreeaudiobook.com and click on the link to over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for stopping by. We're so glad to have you. I'm Heather Wagenhals, flanked by my producer extraordinaire, Michael Terry. And
hey, folks. And
I'm going to run you over. Read you right over there. Didn't even give me a chance to say hi. So that's Miguel.
Hey.
The maestro of moolah. And we will help you get your money mind right on today's show with the following great features. So what is this week's key?
Number 7, breaking the budget.
That would be correct. Ding, 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 ding. You are a winner. We also have a moolah word of the day. And instead of a guest, we are doing a topic-driven show today. And Miguel, what would you like to have as our topic?
We're going to talk about buying a car.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Because that, specifically buying a car, is one of the single greatest things you can do for yourselves as a ticket out of poverty. But most of us don't do it right.
Really?
And it just buries us further into poverty.
Kind of think of buying a car as the worst investment you could possibly make.
Well, that's your problem right there, because it's not an investment.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's a classic. Or whatever. So that's the bigger problem.
Should we have a moolah word that has something to do with buying cars?
Well, I have a moolah word that has to do with pricing, so to speak. So
cool.
And it's but it's like an average everyday word.
Well, that's all right, though.
But we're going to talk about what it means when you hear it in a financial context. How's that?
Yeah,
for being cryptic and elusive.
Okay.
On today's show. Yes. So, buying a car is, again, it can be the ticket out of poverty, but 9 out of 10 of us don't do it right.
Right.
And that's the bummer reality part of it. So we're going to learn a little bit about the millionaire next door on today's show. And hopefully that will give you the foundation for the next car purchase you need to make, whether it's spontaneous, like all of a sudden I'm in a wreck and my car got totaled and I need a new car, or you're just venturing out and you're
trying to improve your self-esteem.
Well, there's that. But or if you're just venturing out for the first time, you want to make sure that when you buy that car, you do it right. And then we can also talk about, if we have enough time, if we have made the mistakes that we talked about on today's show, what we can do to fix it. Because ideally, we want to get ourselves in a better position because you're going to go, oh, great, I already did what you just said. So there are ways to unravel things. It might not be the easiest. It might not be the least painful, but it would get you on the right track. And you need to determine, is momentary pain worth, a lifetime of shackles of indebtedness, or is some momentary pain right now worth financial freedom down the road? And because that's an abstract concept, we don't usually think in those terms. And we would take the shackles today because we don't realize they're actually not going to lead us to financial freedom like we think it is. So enough with the allusion to what today's topic is, and let's get started on today's show. So first off, our key this week is break the budget. And for those of you who haven't joined us in a while or joining us for the first time, the Keys to Riches is now its very own radio program. So you can join us for this week's key at our Keys to Riches radio show powered by Unlock Your Wealth Radio. And it's available on our unlockyourwealthradio.com channel or its very own channel at keys-to-riches.com, where we have all of our shows archived for your perusal. And because we are in the middle of a season, that doesn't mean you're SOL, because you can go back and listen to the entire season from the first key to get yourself up to speed. So please visit keys-to-riches.com for more information in this week's key on breaking the budget and creating a healthy savings and spending plan. So our moolah word of the day, shall we? Should we jump to it?
Sounds like a good idea.
Let's jump to it, shall we?
Let's jump.
Okay. And that's our moolah word of the day, jump.
Jump?
It is. See? It's a noun.
Go ahead, jump.
It's a noun in this case as opposed to an activity. A jump in the financial context is a sudden rise. So, for example, a jump in the cost of living index, meaning all of a sudden today's prices are more expensive than they were last month. Or in a negative sense, there was a jump in unemployment figures in December. So that would be a bad thing also. So to go up suddenly, oil prices have jumped since the war started. That's like a very old definition because now they have fallen. Okay. So we're not in a jump right now. We're in a fall.
Okay.
If we think about it in terms of that specific commodity.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but here's a good context to the word jump, a sudden rise. How about this? Share values have jumped on the stock exchange. So if you own a particular company and you get a jump, that means you've got moolah. It's a rise in the value. So if you have $100 worth of stock and it jumped 10%, now you have 110. Whoopee! That's a good jump.
Yeah.
So jump can be good or bad. It has to be taken within its particular context, and it's a sudden rise. So it's not like some slow growth over time, slow and steady wins the race. It's a jump. And so many factors can affect a jump, but that's today's word is jump. You like it?
I do. You know, when somebody jumps, though, they come back down quickly and land.
Right.
But what the heck?
But that's what happens after you jump.
Right.
But the jump is the rise.
Correct.
It's a sudden rise.
Yeah.
So what happens after the sudden rise is something separate.
I'm nitpicking.
Gravity,
Yeah.
Newton,
Yeah.
physics, the whole deal. Not particular to this definition.
Right.
We're only concerned about it going up. So that's what a jump is. So that's our moolah word of the day. So who knew that a plain Jane 4-letter word could also be a financial term?
In the name of a Van Halen song.
There you go. Yes. So on this week's show, we always talk about your money, credit, and how to get ahead in almost any economy. We also will give you some background as to how we can do things better. So for those of you joining us for the first time, we do a biology-based money management philosophy here called the Keys to Riches. And essentially, we're biologically set up to fail at long-term money management. And so you're thinking, well, why bother if I'm biologically set up to fail at that? Because those who understand this can overcome this.
Can succeed.
Yes. And so we learn to work with the way our body works. And so I thought I would talk about car ownership, because we talk about home ownership as an investment. And I like that you inadvertently misspoke at the beginning of the show and called a car an investment. So unless it is a classic or a collectible car, a car is a depreciating asset, and it is not ever to be confused with an investment, unless you're uber wealthy and, again, collecting them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're just a drain.
I mean, if you're self-employed and you're using your car to get around to your job, your various jobs, I mean, an investment in a low mileage car would be an investment, no?
It's still a tool.
Yeah.
It's a depreciating asset. It's not an investment.
Yeah.
Because an investment, by its very nature, infers
Makes money.
that it makes money.
Yeah.
So, in terms of assets needed to run the business, it's a business investment in tools.
Mm-hmm.
But that tool is not an investment. It's a
Gotcha.
depreciating asset.
Gotcha.
So, and that's some of the challenges is when we get to managing our own money personally, I'll always remember my father used to say this, like if I ever had asked for money or whatever, because, if you were anybody but me, my brother, and my mother, because we were poor, everybody else in my mind, if you had a dad in the house, you were rich.
Yeah.
Even if we lived in the same neighborhood, because you had a dad making money, you did things, you got to have things that me and my brother just didn't get to have.
Yeah.
And again, the phone companies hadn't been deregulated, so long distance was super expensive. So I very rarely talked to my dad on the phone.
Where was he?
In another state, usually, whether it was Nevada or California.
Well, it's amazing to go back and think of those days when you didn't have the money to make a phone call. It's just unbelievable to think that back there. You had a romance, you were away at college, you wanted to talk to your girlfriend, you couldn't do it.
Wrote letters.
Couldn't
He wrote letters. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So everybody was rich, and I remember he's like, money doesn't grow on trees, and I'm like, well, you're rich, because he always had new cars and a nice job and or whatever for the time that we saw him. I remember the one time he came to visit my brother and I, he had a Mustang Fastback.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was in the 70s. I don't know which one it was, but
that car, yeah.
but it said Mach 1 on it. It was like the deal, and he had his pregnant wife with him. I remember that. And then then I never saw another cool car my dad had after that. But anyway, he would always say that, there was never enough money to go around or whatever. There's just, and when you're young and you're kind of trying to figure things out, there are always these excuses. And he used to say this, he always, and this was the inspiration for the take emotion out of the picture key. And which was, I can balance multi-million-dollar budgets to within a cent, but I can't balance my own checkbook. And so I used to always think about why that was. What was different?
You could or he could?
He could. That's what he said. He could balance multi-million-dollar budgets to within a cent, but he couldn't manage his own checkbook. And I was like, well, what does that mean? You instantly become, ignorant when you get home? Like, how do you lose that knowledge, right? And so that's what made me think. Knowledge is superfluous without application. It wasn't that he didn't know what to do, but that's where, people get emotionally engaged to the blood, sweat, and tears that they put into their job. So that dollar represents the emotion, not the effort, or the value you brought to the hour, but the emotion that you mentally put into that hour. So therefore you feel entitled to spend it whichever way you want. Yeah. And so the rules that apply in business somehow don't apply at home. And that's the problem with some of these people that like Occupy Wall Street and all of this stuff. They don't get, because they're trying to apply their personal finance logic, which isn't really logic at all, but it's their personal finance emotion, and instinct about money, to the way Wall Street runs their businesses. And if they ran their personal lives like businesses ran their finances, then they would see clearly why companies have to have so much money and be flush with cash, because you have to have retained earnings, because you have to have money to buy extra capital. It's not like, you see a business account that's got $100,000 in there and you're like, well, that's nuts. Why can't they afford this? And I'm like, because they've got to finance inventory. They've got to buy raw goods. They've got like all these other things that go along with that. And if you actually do the math out, they really don't have $100,000. Yeah. They probably have negative 75 for all we know. So that's the thing that, is our biggest challenge, is because, the minute we see a dollar, we think it's ours to do whatever we want with, whether or not it's already been earmarked or allocated or should be earmarked or allocated for something else. And so that's where we get into trouble. So the minute we start making money, we think we need a car, right? And so we don't think in terms of how much does this car cost. The first thing we think of is how much can I afford monthly? And we don't think about how much can I afford the insurance. We think about how much can I afford a payment. So we immediately think finance and we don't think ownership. All right.
Right.
And we also get a lot of people that have heard about, the way rich people take advantage of cars is they lease.
I leased a car once.
And we think that leasing is the right thing to do, but leasing is just a long-term rental.
Horrible.
That's all it is. It's a long-term rental on the amount of depreciation. And what happens when you lease a car on payments instead of just paying out the lease, you just write a check for the whole amount, is when we lease a car, we usually make payments on it. And when we do that, we don't have any deductions to offset that, like mileage or stuff like that, and when we go to apply for financing for larger ticket, more valuable investment type items like homes, they count the liability of the lease against you, but they can't count it as an asset because you do not own it.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, when you look at a balance sheet and you see I've got a $10,000 loan on a car and the car's worth $15,000, I've got plus 5 in net worth. Okay. But if you have a $10,000 lease and 0 down asset to write down because you leased it and don't own it, now you have a negative $10,000 net worth. So all leasing does is increase your net worth. But I'm saying this because if we read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, and they say, oh, well, rich people do this, that, and the other, and you have to be rich in order to buy a car. No, you don't. You have to be smart because most millionaires, and if you read the book Millionaire Next Door, it's a great example, is, you have your PAWs and your UAWs. So your UAWs are your under accumulators of wealth and your PAWs are your prodigious accumulators of wealth. And the millionaire next door is a prodigious accumulator of wealth because he knows not to spend more for his car than he can afford. Period. Not afford minimum monthly payments. Yeah. So my initial financial philosophy goes out the door because it doesn't matter what the minimum monthly payment is. If you cannot afford to pay cash for something, by the end of the month, you cannot afford to pay for it, bottom line.
Really?
Exactly.
So you're not a car loan fan at all.
Nope.
You don't agree with it. So what does a struggling $40,000 a year guy do who has to buy a car?
He buys a car that he can afford. So
a piece of car.
It doesn't have to be a piece of crap car.
Yeah.
You can get a nice car for $5,000.
Yeah.
That's not even 10% annually.
Okay.
And if you can't save $5,000 for a car, you got bigger problems than buying the next car.
Interesting. So you just don't buy into it.
Nope.
How about 0% financing?
Different story. Okay. We can't talk about that right now.
All right.
You're throwing a monkey wrench into my plan. Don't do that. Good job, Miguel. Way to derail us.
What kind of producer are you?
Yeah, whatever. So this segment of Unlock Your Wealth Radio is sponsored in part by KeepMyID.org.
I'll deal with you later.
Exactly. I'll deal with you off air. So, as I was saying, this segment of Unlock Your Wealth Radio is sponsored in part by KeepMyID.org, the only service that actually prevents identity theft. Sign up for your special offer for Unlock Your Wealth Radio listeners by visiting unlockyourwealthradio.com/keepmyid and click on the link to put your credit on lockdown today. Remember to use the promo code WAGS to do that. So, you guys are like saying, oh, well, that's a piece of crap car. Well, perhaps if, we avoided judgment. Remember that whole, if you're pointing fingers, you got 3 pointing back at you. Mm-hmm. So perhaps we have overestimated our personal value when we say that's a piece of crap car. Because you know what? Cars have extended warranties. You know, cars have great warranties built into them. If cars were properly maintained, and there's no reason why you have to buy a crappy car. Carfax will tell you if a car has been in an accident. So that is an investment. Using Carfax, whatever the fee is, $25, $50, I don't know what it is. That's an investment well worth it, because it's better to spend $25 or $50 on a report to avoid a car than to buy a car and have thousands of dollars worth of repairs. I mean, silly me. You know, why would I spend? That's what I had one of my coaching clients say. Why would I spend $50 on a car I'm not going to buy? And I'm like, because you're avoiding spending more on a broken car. And this was a person who could easily afford the $50 for the report. So when it comes to buying a car, we have to get out of our own way, and we have to accept that while we want and have champagne tastes, we have to remember the beer budget that we're on right now. Okay, because if we expect to be able to afford the champagne later, we have to be prudent with our finances now. So what we need to do is find a car that's affordable. Now, there are, cars that have been built over the last 20 years are amazing. And you would be surprised at what you can find. I got my mom a nice car that was a repossessed car, and it only cost me a few $1,000. And it was perfect for her. It ran well. I had it checked out by the service department to make sure that it was okay. And so because it was a repossession, I got a smoking deal on it. You know, and that's the key, is that if car ownership is the single greatest ticket to escaping poverty, why would we further incur debt to have one? Because what it does is transportation allows us to get a better job farther away. We're not stuck by geography when we have transportation. And most of us, I mean, and Arizona is ridiculous. We go to these big, malls, and we park at one end and we do our shopping there, and then we get back in the car and drive around to the other end, and then get out and finish shopping instead of walking. It doesn't occur to us to walk, here in Arizona. I've mentioned to my husband, we moved from this area where we used to walk to supper all the time, and we could still walk to supper from where we are. Yeah. But the perception of the distance is so much greater that my husband's like, no. And I'm like, if we were in New York, we would walk from one side of New York to the other to get a great steak. And you can't walk up the street. Seriously? It's flawed.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean? Because think about it. Think about the distance from where Houston's is to my house. You could easily walk that in New York, right?
Houston's
on Scottsdale.
On Scottsdale Road.
To my house.
How far is it? A mile?
Maybe.
Not even. How about, what's the other place?
But those resorts down the road are even closer. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? So it's all about perception.
Is there a sidewalk?
And yeah. So it's all about framing and perception. So if you think a car is going to be a piece of crap car, you're probably going to wind up subconsciously filtering for a piece of crap car, and you're going to buy one to reinforce your belief. But if you believe you can get a good car for a decent price, and then instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, plus insurance, plus maintenance, plus all the things we never think about when we go to buy a car,
a warranty.
That's a waste of money.
Yeah.
So they come with good enough warranties. So extended warranties are a waste of money. If you get your car maintained properly, any major derailment is going to be covered by a manufacturer's warranty. You don't need to buy extended warranties. Waste of money. Go invest it. But by the time you stack up all of those things, what have you saved by getting that better job if you blow it all on a car payment? It doesn't get you ahead. It actually puts you further behind, because the idea is that we're able to build wealth faster because we can accumulate faster. But if we only are accumulating debt faster than assets, we're not really doing a good job. And like I said, a lease is not even collecting an asset. That's just collecting debt without an asset offset.
You know, I have a family member that's the poster child for what not to do with cars, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I could tell you the latest adventure, but it's gonna.
And that child goes to the Bank of Dad, which is finally closed.
Yeah, it's fine. It's been closed for a couple of years now.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. I'll tell you off air. It's too
Too juicy?
It's too juicy.
It's too juicy? Yeah. Okay. So the listeners are like, great. Thanks for dangling out there.
Well, I mean, he had to break down and buy a Corolla. And it's so funny because it's not a cool car.
It could be cool if you frame it right.
Yeah. So this is the dilemma here.
Wheels are cooler than walking.
But he's finally admitted that it's cool. It's cool now, so it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's
see,
okay.
he's got to reframe it.
You just got to redefine it, and he's getting it. Boy, it's taken a long time.
Yeah, because we get this false sense of we're fabulous, but we get strapped with a car payment that's just so ridiculous that we're buying our fabulousness and we're not truly fabulous. I mean, because think about it, that when we buy designer clothes and luxury brands that we can't afford, that makes us posers. If you think about it,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Is we're pretending to be something that we're not.
And we've all done it.
No question. Hey, I'm just as guilty as the next guy.
We've all done it.
And people that buy knockoffs or counterfeits, that speaks to your character and integrity.
Yeah.
And it's not as important for me to have a Louis Vuitton and be willing to buy, a counterfeit than it is for me to know that I could comfortably afford to buy a Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
That's what's more important to me, is to have the means, not the show, because people see through that. People see through that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're not getting ahead. And so when you are older, if you're still posing and you're in your 40s and you're a poser, when people expect you to have built wealth by this point in your life, you're going to lose more credibility. And it starts with a car. And I had to have a BMW. I wanted to live this life that I was this, rich heiress, like all these other girls that I ran around with that were. Yeah. But I had to work, and I couldn't rush a sorority because I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
Because I had this stupid car payment for this BMW that I had to have so I could look like them. But I wasn't them, and I refused to admit that. And it's not that I wasn't good enough, because clearly I've surpassed that at this point in my life. But the challenge is that I desperately wanted to be good enough in that moment to feel equal to them. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that I wasn't equal to them. I was using the wrong measuring stick.
Yeah.
And stuff that they didn't buy. My BMW technically was worth more than theirs because I was paying for it. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even, they got theirs for free because, right. Mommy and daddy bought it. Right. And what I wasn't understanding or whatever is I thought that put them ahead. And when you look at where they are now, it didn't. It actually crippled them.
Sure.
Because I have a work ethic that'll blow them all away.
Yeah.
And in looking back at all those people that I was envious of or jealous of back then, and I see where I am now versus where they are now, I'm like, oh my God, it totally wasn't even a contest. Right. Who knew? Right. Because at that point I was thinking it was a race and not a journey. And now that I'm further along the journey, I see it, but you don't see that in your youth. Yeah. You don't see that in your youth.
Unfortunately, you don't.
No, and so we have to be careful that we don't overburden ourselves, and that's what's more important about buying a car than whether or not it works, what the insurance is, and people are like, "Well, you didn't tell me how to buy a car," and I'm like, "Yes, I did." Reframe your scenario so you can achieve true financial wealth.
It doesn't have to be cool. It doesn't.
Well, no, just reframe your level of coolness. It can
Right.
still be cool.
And redefine cool. Right?
Yay. So for more great resources and tools to fix your credit, get out of debt, and build more wealth and happiness, do what other savvy listeners have and visit unlockyourwealthradio.com, where you go to get your money mind right so your wealth and happiness will follow. For more great resources, join our Insiders Club today so you can start building wealth right now. For Unlock Your Wealth Radio and the Maestro of Moolah, Michael Terry, I'm Heather Wagenhals. Now go out and unlock your wealth today.
UnlockYourWealthRadio.com is produced by Heather Wagenhals and the Unlock Your Wealth Foundation. UnlockYourWealthRadio.com and its affiliates are copyrighted 2016 with all rights reserved. For more information on the Keys to Riches Financial Wellness series, please visit our website at www.unlockyourwealth.com.